Internet is now working again. Problems.
This is we're live.
Yes, so now it says we're live, but now you don't have to worry about that at all.
Okay.
Okay. So, morning everybody, and morning to Annabelle, the Costa, for joining me this morning. All very nervous and having our coffee. Did you actually finish your coffee?
Flattened.
You want another one? We'll grab you another one. Okay, morning there, hello. So I asked Annabelle to join me this morning because we recently had the most phenomenal training. Chris from Campbell going past there. Morning, Chris. We had the most phenomenal training recently with Annabelle, which we have to do annually, which I had forgotten about, on FICA, which is not the nicest subject to talk about, but it is probably one of the most important subjects to talk about in not only in property, but in South Africa in general. Yeah. So please bear with us this morning on this very serious subject, but we will try and make it lighthearted where possible. And so Annabelle basically had, I always understood FICA to be, you take a copy of your ID, proof of residence, and wherever somebody was going to pay more than 25,000 Rand in cash, that was what FICA was, and we had to just report it to our FICA officer in the office. And I just sort of stood back and was like, okay, that's cool. That's how I've operated for however many years. I've checked my box as an agent. Yeah. But that's not how it works. It is so much more. And so I thought it pertinent that Annabelle would join us today and explain. So, Annabelle, please, can you briefly explain to me what is FICA and its purpose of FICA?
So, South Africa got together with a bunch of countries to try and come up with ideas on how to tackle money laundering.
Yes, you are. Sorry.
Okay. To tackle money laundering and terrorist funding and stuff, and they came up with some policies that countries should implement. So we implemented them through the Financial Intelligence Centre Act. Okay, 19 years ago.
Okay.
So it started out with you need to know your client and you need to get their copies of their documents, and then you considered to have known your client.
Yes.
But what was happening is that people were not listening to what was being said about the transactions, etc., and the money, where it was coming from, how it was made. Yes. And we were just going, we've ticked our boxes and we've moved on.
Like me, yes. Okay.
So 5 years ago, an amendment came in which says that now we've got to do due diligences on our clients, where we have to understand their source of wealth. So does it make sense that this person's coming to you and wanting to put in an offer for 12 million Rand, but they have a really low paying job? Or maybe they're a politician who's been in the news for some shady stuff and they're coming with a whole bunch of cash.
If they won the lotto, like the guy that won the other day, he won 72 million, that's a different story. Yeah, that's fine. But it's other people we got to worry about. Yeah. Okay.
So we've become the eyes and ears of the Financial Intelligence Centre because that they need us to be. And what's happening in the industry is we are not doing that. Yes. And in most industries, we are not doing that. We're fighting it. You guys get serious pushback. We get pushback. Why are you asking me all this very private information?
But why is it needed? Because that was one of the things that you said. It's actually a long-term effect in terms of we are potentially on a grey list, which I didn't even know existed, and that other countries around the world also do this. So it's not just a South African thing.
No. So currently there's 39 members, but of the task force type setup. Okay. But countries that are naughty countries, so very naughty countries get blacklisted.
Oh, okay.
Like North Korea and Myanmar and one or two others.
Right.
And then there's the grey listing, which is that we have the procedures in place to deal with this, but we're not doing it.
We're not doing our job
and
properly.
We are not prosecuting people that should be prosecuted.
Yeah.
None of us are doing our jobs as we should.
Yes.
And so now it's like we're on this list of the naughty kids, and it has a potential effect to affect our investments.
And that, I think, is where all our ears in the room suddenly went,
yes.
Okay, hang on a minute.
So some countries will not be allowed to invest here, and some countries will not want to invest here because we are considered more risky and dodgy and
Okay, so it is important for us to follow the various procedures that need to be done.
We're becoming very strict about this now because we are in trouble. And it's going to be heard in Feb if we're actually going onto the grey list. So we're not quite there, but they are now coming at you and us and all the other industries that are accountable institutions under this act, and making sure we are following the process. Yeah.
So who do we need to FICA in along the way as agents and as attorneys?
So you've got to FICA the parties to your transaction. So you get a mandate, you get you have a business relationship with your seller. So technically you're meant to FICA them, but they're not the one paying the cash. So the due diligence part of the thing more focuses on the buyer who's coming to you with cash. Yes, there might be an opportunity with your seller who isn't a well-known politician who you just got to check there's nothing untoward there, but generally the main due diligence comes on your buyers and your tenants, and same with a landlord as well.
Okay, because just going back to the sellers and landlords, I always thought, well, we got the copy of the ID and proof of residence to prove that they are the owners, but that's obviously then separate to FICA. Or is it part of FICA?
That's verifying who they are and whatnot. But your tenants who come to you and want to take up a lease, you got to go, okay, well, where are you getting the money from? And you need to know that anyway, because you need to protect your landlord as to whether they can afford it. By the same token of your buyers, you also need to check their wealth and where do they have this money, because you're potentially wasting your seller's time.
Yes.
So it kind of fits together, but you meant to go one step further and actually do a due diligence on them and figure out how they have made this wealth.
How they've made the wealth.
And if something's not adding up, then you need to report it to FICA.
So when do we have to report it, or when do we need to FICA them? At this beginning of the transaction, basically, when we're getting all of the information, writing it all out.
So FICA say before you enter into a business relationship, you are meant to be doing these, getting these documents and doing your due diligence during the process. And FICA say, the minute you smell a rat or something's not adding up and they can't, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2, you're meant to report, which will give them an opportunity to potentially investigate.
Okay. So now, say from a tenant's point of view, he's
cash, not EFT, into an account of more than 25. The bank has to report to FICA and we have to report to FICA.
But we don't always know that money is
you wouldn't
pay cash
unless it's coming into your account. Okay. But if you're aware that this person is regularly paying cash transactions, you might want to go, hang on, are they trying to evade tax? If they're trying to evade tax, you're going to want to report them to FICA. But if it's black and white, now it's moved from 25 to 50. Now it's black and white with, if they pay over 50 into your account, you need to report them. If you hear that it's come into the attorney's account, for example, you might want to report them on a suspicious transaction, because how come they have so much money? If it's a less accumulative amount, you might want to make that decision too, but the requirement has fallen away because ironically we are such a they say we're such a cash rich nation that they can't keep up, so they've had to lift the threshold.
So that's why it's gone from 25 to 50, and that was only now in October that's actually been implemented. Okay, so that was something that we learned the other day. So everybody, it's now 50,000 rand is the cash threshold. So that's physical cash going into an account, but you also mentioned in terms of EFTs and tracing and tracking the EFTs and where is the source of wealth coming from. And that was where we all went up in arms, because we can't really ask our buyers where their money's coming from. And they turn around and they go, well, it's a cash sale, we'll do an EFT. But again, where is that money coming from? Because in our mind, it's an EFT, it's bank to bank. So what do we do with that type of transaction? So you've got to figure out.
So for the couple that have, 50,000 rand deposit and they're getting a bond and they're both salaried, that all makes sense, right? They're going to pay their loan off from proceeds of their salary. You find out what job they have. That all makes sense. The bigger the risk is where people come with cash. You have to understand where they got that from. Did they get it from dividends on businesses they're involved? Therefore, you meant to ask them, what are the businesses you're involved with? You potentially can get a letter from the auditor to say, this guy made it from these businesses. This is what the businesses do. You're fine. But it's where someone can't quite answer your questions or doesn't answer them or behaves really badly.
Or there's money coming in from overseas.
Or the money from all over. Overseas is okay as long as you track it to that person and how they made it. Someone might have lived overseas for a long time or sent money and brought it back. So it does make us feel uncomfortable. But buyers need to understand that there's an obligation on you and I to check that the funds that they have are legit funds, right? And if they behave really badly, you actually meant to report them, because that's suspicious behavior and they're not answering your questions. So people also need to be aware of that. So
Yes.
watch how you
Because-
behave.
Yeah,
You know?
because that was the other thing, was you said that it's also the onus is on us to failure to report, and if something comes up along the way and we haven't reported, we can actually be held liable and go to prison.
Yep.
Or
15
pay
years
a
or 100
10
million.
100 million rand fine. Yes, I remember.
So sorry, Mr. Buyer, that I have to ask you a few questions.
Yeah.
But if you got your money legitimately, there should be no issue.
No issues,
You know,
yes.
good dividends from our company, whatever.
Yeah, and like you say,
no
letter
issue.
from the auditor will suffice, and then that'll just put everybody happy. And
Yeah.
but it's when people are getting this massive wealth of 15 million rand cash sale EFT, and you don't really know.
No, and you're a policeman
And,
or something.
Yeah, or
That
they're
doesn't
driving
make
along in a little skadonk, and I know that that's no judgment, because there are people out there, but it's still,
Yeah.
you have to ask those hard questions, as
You
you
do.
say.
You do.
And then one attorney actually advised me at one point to do what they call, when it's all a cash sale like that of such a huge amount, because it's then a conclusive sale technically, to do subject to cash coming in within a certain period of time, because then you don't have to worry about the breach clauses and all those notice letters, etc., etc. And if the money's not in within the 14 or 21 days, etc., it's it's not in.
If you and the seller are not going to sue for breach of contract ever, then you can do that. And yes, it stops us running around sending out breach letters.
Yes.
But if you are actually wanting to hold someone accountable for breaching the contract, then you might want to put that clause. But if that person comes along and puts in a cash offer and doesn't come up with the money,
Yes.
you are meant to report them to FICA.
Oh,
Because that is suspicious. Why have they basically committed fraud?
so because that's the thing, is a cash offer is a conclusive offer straight away by merit of it being cash.
Yeah.
So if they haven't come up with the cash, you're saying it's
What are they doing?
reportable
Why are they
offence.
doing? And FIC want to see if that person pops up all over the show doing that,
Okay.
and then can investigate.
Okay, so that's
their
where we
behavior.
have had the odd buyer going around and doing an offer there and then another offer there a couple of months later, etc., and the money's just never materializing.
Yeah.
For what purpose do people do that though?
Still got to figure. Sometimes girlfriends, sometimes to impress. But there's been a lot of times I just can't figure it out.
Can't figure it out. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
But anyway,
me
you
neither.
get your own back, because you're not allowed to tell anyone that you've reported.
Okay. So that's the other thing. So any reporting is done behind the scenes, and we don't know, and we go to our FICA compliance officer in the office, and then they decide whether it's going to be reported or not, but we just give them all the evidence. So we actually don't know if it continues on or not.
No, and the clients don't know.
The clients don't know
Beware
either.
those who behave badly.
Are there any questions there along the way on FICA? Rob, you've always got something to say after the fact if you're online there. Okay, any other questions? Anything you want to say before we sort of summarize? And
No, I think
because we've discussed the collapse sales and the cash there, and never hear from them again. And then obviously in terms of the factor going from 25,000 to 50,000. So again, can I just ask you a question? So say somebody goes along and 1 month they deposit 5,000 cash, and then the next month they do an EFT, and then they do 10,000, and once it hits that 50,000 threshold,
well, that's a once-off.
Once-off, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, is it
That's a once-off. But if they do little bits like that, some people do have cash. That might be okay.
Okay.
But it's the regular bigger amounts that maybe you want to start asking why.
questions. Okay, all right.
So you just have to look at your situation, listen to what is said. I think the big thing is this has become a really big part of your and my job.
Yes.
And I think that people need to understand that we are just trying to comply with the law so that we don't lose our livelihood, lose your boss's livelihood, etc., etc. And they need to just cooperate, because it just makes it so much easier, and help us understand the situation so we can do our little due diligence and put it in the file, and off we go.
And as you said, if there's nothing to hide, it's very easy and simple. But as soon as people start becoming overly defensive and maybe even attack mode, then you know there's something to hide. So as an agent or as an attorney, whatever, just prick your ears up, whatever, and also, start doing some investigation.
I think agents need to take ownership that this is it. This has been in for 5 years. This part of it has been in for 5 years, and yet people are still not doing it. They come from a I'm so sorry point of view rather than this is what I have to do. You need to cooperate, and that's the end of that.
And there is a clause in the sale agreement, etc. And even on our mandates, I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's a clause in there on FICA that, you know, we have to comply with FICA rules and regulations.
And you will provide it,
and it's an international rule, as you said. So it really is something that we just need to do. And it's a horrible conversation to have with people if they're in that bad environment. But for everybody else,
it should be a
most people watching, it'll be a non-issue. But thank you so much for that, and then we'll discuss coffee another time, I think, because that's a whole separate interview process as well, which also
we need to come back for some more coffee.
We'll definitely come back for more coffee. So also today we are at Flowers on Chartwell, which is a new little coffee shop and florist, and they've got a gift shop as well inside, which we actually need to go and have a squiz at as well. So just here on Chartwell Drive in Umhlanga, give them a little bit of a support when you can. And have a super Tuesday, everybody. Remember to send through questions. Obviously, each week I've got different guests lined up, and I will get to your questions along the way. Thank you so much, and see you next week. Bye. Where is that now? See, I always get that wrong.